You're listening to Procurement 6, the weekly podcast from the team at Art of Procurement that summarizes this week in procurement in just 6 short segments.
Hi there, I'm Kelly Barner, and today is Friday, January 26th, 2024.
6.
This week's episode of Procurement 6 is brought to you by the recently rebranded Art of Supply podcast. Formerly known as Dial P for Procurement, we've rebranded the show to bring the look into alignment with the content we were already creating. News-driven and research-based, and brought to you each Thursday wherever you listen to podcast audio.
5.
In this week's Art of Procurement podcast episode, Philip Eidson spoke with global procurement thought leader Stephen Ashcroft. Steve is the founder of a new international professional development program for procurement called Map and Territory. His procurement experience spans over 40 countries and multiple industries. And with that experience comes valuable insight into procurement's biggest strengths, as well as the weaknesses that could hold us back. In this clip, Phil asks Steve where he thinks procurement is most underappreciated and how to change these perceptions to elevate procurement's influence in the business.
Yeah, I did, and thank you for the heads up, Phil, because these are big questions. But I'm obviously tired of seeing people on LinkedIn telling me that they're a chief transformation officer, right? So the underappreciated is the importance of being a change agent. Right. So that recognition that you're, as a procurement leader, going to challenge the status quo. You inherit a team, you inherit an agreed set of procedures, you do take calculated risks, and everyone always says it's calculated, but you're taking a risk because you're introducing change, because the vast majority of your stakeholders, right, are invested in the current model. It's a small percentage of people in the C-suite who are wanting the changes, right? So embracing new technology or new culture or new processes, being able to drive change, yeah? And that might recognize that when you say drive change, you say, well, actually, on occasion, you might need to nurture change. You may need to foster change. But ultimately, there's got to be a change. And that underappreciated aspect of a procurement leader is absolutely key. And a recognition also that there is something when it comes to that change about the pace of change, and ensuring, and come back to my stakeholder engagement, is to recognize that you've got people on board with you of influence who are going to help you embed that change, right? Yeah. Because when we say, oh, it's going to change, well, what does change look like? What are we expecting is going to be different? How are we going to make these improvements that comes in change? That may be about compliance, for goodness sake. It might be payment terms. It might be technology. It may be the fact that there's some professional development. We know full well that practitioners, probably 10% are interested in professional development. Maybe 70% are somewhat neutral. And I don't know, maybe the other 20% think they're the greatest thing since sliced bread and don't want to change anything. Yeah. So how you actually bring along your people in that regard, I see that as an underappreciated skill. I'm a people person, so maybe I would say this, right? But making that change is certainly a very valuable element of a procurement person, more than knowing I know the EU regulations or FIDIC or whatever. How do you actually motivate and bring discipline to your teams to introduce a new way of working? That's a really strong skill.
Being able to adapt to change yourself is difficult enough. But to bring your team or the C-suite or the whole business along with you is what really positions procurement as an influencer inside the organization. To listen to the full episode, go to artofprocurement.com/podcast or search for Art of Procurement and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also click the link in today's show notes.
4.
In this week's new episode of The Art of Supply, I tried an experiment. I read an academic paper titled How Far Goods Travel: Global Transport and Supply Chains from 1965 to 2020. It was written by Sharat Ganapati, an assistant professor of international economics at Georgetown University and a faculty research fellow at the National Bureau of Economic Research, and Won-Fun Wong, assistant professor of economics at the University of Oregon. The paper was published in the Journal of Economic Perspectives last summer. A challenging but rewarding read, the paper takes a new look at global transportation. Unlike traditional trade metrics, which often fail to reflect the role of distance, they examine transportation usage worldwide by weight and value as well as distance. Now, if you're not reading academic papers all the time, it can be a bit of a stretch. I'll be totally honest, it was for me. But it was worth the time required to unpack. I highly recommend that you check out my podcast about it and even try reading the paper yourself. Check out the link in today's show notes for the podcast and long-form article, both of which contain a link to the paper.
This is Procurement 6 from Art of Procurement. To get notified every time an episode is published, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe. 3.
News about AI continues to dominate the headlines. It was the talk of the town at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and it continues to be a popular theme for webinars, white papers, and podcast interviews. Well, now we have a new voice weighing in on AI, one with substantial global reach. Pope Francis has acknowledged that he was the victim of a deepfake photo, or an image created with the help of AI and shared as though it were real. The photo, which was circulated on social media last year, showed the pontiff wearing an ankle-length white puffer coat. In an official statement, Pope Francis said, quote, "The technology of simulation behind these programs can be useful in certain specific fields, but it becomes perverse when it distorts our relationship with others and with reality." I agree with his statement, but, without being disrespectful, of course, would like to add to it. When human beings give in to temptation and make poor choices, they can wield any tool, physical or digital, to do evil work. The AI didn't make a deepfake photo of the Pope all by itself, nor did it share that photo to social media without permission. Appropriate safeguards are good business, but we also have to keep an eye on the people involved as well, and there will be bad actors as long as people walk the earth. Fortunately, that's something that falls directly into Pope Francis's purview. To read the full article, click on the link to the Reuters piece in today's show notes.
2.
Despite the understandable enthusiasm around supply chain sustainability, there are many challenges associated with the fight to lower emissions. There are regulations, costs, and engineering topics to overcome, just to name a few. One of the challenges procurement will appreciate most is the journey towards a workable business model that reflects today's infrastructure reality and companies' ability to invest. In this week's episode of the Sourcing Hero podcast, I spoke with Ron Hunt, Director of Business Development for Forum Mobility, a company that is working to make it realistic for fleets to achieve their zero emissions goals without having to build capital-intensive charging capabilities. In our conversation, Ron shared much of the advice he offers to carriers that are looking to partner with their customers as they pursue the building of zero-emissions fleets. To hear the episode, check out the link in today's show notes or find The Sourcing Hero wherever you listen to podcasts.
1.
Before I let you go, we have an upcoming event I'd like to call your attention to. Next week, I'll be hosting the State of Packaging Procurement in 2024 with Matt Reddington, Vice President of Packaging and Logistics at Procure Analytics. Packaging is a category that is sometimes thought of as indirect, sometimes thought of as direct, but is, generally speaking, not thought about as much as it should be. Sign up using the link in today's show notes and join Matt and me live on January 31st at 11 a.m. Eastern.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. If you've enjoyed this pod, help us grow and tell your peers to search for Procurement 6 wherever they get their podcasts.